Am I the a-hole for ruining my dad and my stepmom's plans for her to adopt me and not feeling bad about it? I'm currently 17, but the weight of this situation feels like it's been sitting on my chest since I was 5 years old. I'm writing this from my room, listening to my dad and stepmom argue in the kitchen about my future, as if I'm a piece of property they're trying to figure out how to tax. The walls in this house are thin, and I can hear every sharp word, every sigh of frustration from my dad, and the high-pitched, jagged tone my stepmom gets when she isn't getting her way. To understand why things are so explosive right now, you have to understand the background. My parents divorced when I was a toddler. Both of them had a lot of issues. My mom has been in and out of prison my entire life, mostly drug-related stuff and theft. My dad was the same way for a while. He was in and out of the system too, but he managed to get his act together right around the time I turned 5 or 6. That's when he met my stepmom. I never liked her. Even as a little kid, I could feel the shift in the energy when she walked into a room. My dad went from being this relaxed, albeit slightly messy, guy to being someone who was constantly looking over his shoulder to see if he'd left a crumb on the counter. She is the definition of a control freak. She has these incredibly strict rules about everything: what you can eat, when you're allowed to eat it, and where you're allowed to sit while you're eating. I remember one specific Saturday when I was 7. I had grabbed a small bag of pretzels from the pantry because I was hungry between her scheduled meal times. I sat on the floor in the hallway to eat them. She caught me and spent the next 30 minutes screaming at me about how I was contaminating her carpets and how I was an ungrateful brat who didn't respect the roof over my head. She made me vacuum the entire house twice as punishment. That was my life. Every day was a minefield. She's verbally abusive, plain and simple. It's not just strict parenting. It's the way she talks to people like they're something she stepped in on the sidewalk. Before they even got married, her niece came to stay with us for a couple of years. I watched that girl, who used to be bright and happy, sink into a deep, dark depression. She was spoken to like a piece of shit every single day. My stepmom would call her worthless, lazy, and a burden on the family for the smallest mistakes, like forgetting to dry a dish or sleeping in until 9 a.m. on a Saturday. I saw the way it broke her spirit, and I knew that was exactly what was in store for me. When I was 9, they got married. Almost immediately, the talk of adoption started. My mom was serving a longer sentence at the time, and they decided it was the perfect time for my stepmom to legally become my mother. They filed a petition to terminate my mom's parental rights. They wanted her gone from the paperwork entirely. They wanted to erase her and replace her with this woman who made me feel small every single day. I remember the day I had to talk to the judge and the social worker. I was terrified. My dad had spent weeks prepping me, telling me how lucky I was that someone wanted to step up and be a mother to me. He told me that if I didn't agree, the state might take me away. A lie, obviously, but I was 9. But when I got into that room with the judge and it was just us, the truth came out. The judge was a kind-looking woman, and the social worker had a notebook. They asked me how I felt. I broke down. I told them everything. I told them I didn't want to be adopted. I explained how she treated the niece, how she treated me, and how the house felt like a prison. I told them about the pretzels, the vacuuming, and the way she called me names when my dad wasn't looking. I told them I didn't love her, and I didn't want her to have legal power over me. I remember saying, "She doesn't want to be my mom, she wants to be my boss." The petition was rejected. My dad and stepmom were stunned. They couldn't believe a 9-year-old had ruined their vision of a perfect family. My mom kept her rights, but they didn't give up. A year later, my mom, who was struggling and probably felt guilty for being in prison, she thought she was doing me a favor by willingly gave up rights. Thankfully, she didn't. They tried the adoption petition a second time. Again, I was brought in to speak to the professionals. And again, I told them that things hadn't changed. If anything, the verbal abuse had gotten worse because they were mad at me for humiliating them the first time. My stepmom had spent that whole year making snide comments like, "Well, if I were your real mother, maybe you'd have better manners," or "It's a shame your father is stuck with a kid who doesn't appreciate family." I told the judge I still didn't want it. The adoption was blocked again. My dad and stepmom were beyond angry. For years, it was this silent and sometimes very loud resentment hanging over us. They felt like I had made their lives difficult by keeping my mom on my birth certificate. They viewed my refusal as an act of war. My stepmom would constantly complain about how hard it was to get medical forms signed or how she was treated like a stranger at my school. She blamed me for the administrative hurdles, never once stopping to think that her own behavior was the reason I didn't want her to have the authority to handle them. Fast forward to now. I'm 17, and my mom is finally out of prison. She's living in a halfway house and trying to get her life together. She's not perfect, but she's my mom, and more importantly, she's the person who didn't spend the last decade telling me I was a burden. Because she never signed her rights away, and the adoption never went through, she is still legally my mother. This became a huge issue recently because I'm applying for college. I knew my stepmom had a plan. She's talked about it for years. She wants me to go to the local community college, stay at home so I can keep doing the heavy cleaning and cooking for the family and study accounting because she thinks it's safe. She even told me she'd be vetting any potential part-time jobs I applied for. She wanted to hold on to her control for as long as possible. I decided to bypass her entirely. I contacted my mom. We met at a coffee shop near her halfway house. She was shaky and nervous, but when I showed her the FAFSA and the enrollment papers, she signed them without hesitation. She told me she was proud of me for wanting to go away to school. It was the first time in years I felt like an adult was actually listening to what I wanted for my life. I handled the entire process without letting my stepmom see a single document. I used my mom's information for the financial aid. When my stepmom found out, she absolutely lost it. She found an email from the university on the family computer and realized I'd applied to a school 3 hours away, a school she never approved. She started screaming about how I sabotaged the family and how much easier my life would be if I had just let her adopt me. My dad joined in, telling me I'm being ungrateful and that I made life more difficult for them by keeping my mom in the picture. He keeps saying they only wanted what was best for me, but I know what was best for them was having me under their thumb. Do you have any idea how much money we could have saved on taxes if I was your legal mother? She shrieked at me last night. Do you know how much easier the paperwork would have been? That's when I snapped. I told her, I don't care about your taxes or your paperwork. You wanted to be my mother on paper, so you could control me in person. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a servant with no legal recourse. The fact that you're mad about my mom signing my papers proves that I was right to stop the adoption when I was 9. You never cared about me. You just cared about the power. She started crying. That fake, manipulative crying she does to get my dad on her side. And my dad told me I was being cruel and that I don't understand the sacrifices she made. He told me I ruined their plans for a unified home. But I don't feel bad. I feel a sense of relief that is almost overwhelming. I've been playing defense for 8 years, and for the first time, I'm on the offensive. I'm going to college. I'm going to a school she didn't pick. And I'm doing it with a name and the mother I chose to keep. Am I the a-hole? Update. The argument in the kitchen didn't stop that night. It dragged on in waves, sometimes going quiet long enough to make it seem like it was over, then rising again with sharper edges. It went past midnight, then into that heavy silence where nobody is actually asleep, just waiting for the next sound to set things off again. By morning, nothing had been resolved. It just settled into something colder. From that point on, the house changed in a way that was hard to explain to anyone who hadn't lived through it. It wasn't louder. If anything, it became quieter, but not in a peaceful way. It felt calculated, measured. Every interaction started carrying weight behind it, like there was always something being held back or set aside for later. My stepmom stopped yelling as much, at least directly. Instead, she switched to something more controlled. She talked to my dad loudly enough for me to hear, making sure her words carried through the walls. Conversations about responsibility, about disrespect, about how some kids throw away opportunities because they think they know better. It wasn't aimed at me directly, but it didn't need to be. The point was always clear. My dad followed her lead. He didn't explode like before. He just became distant, like I'd already left, and he was adjusting early. He stopped asking about school, stopped acknowledging anything related to my applications. If I brought something up, he'd give short, dismissive responses or change the subject entirely. It was like the version of him that used to exist around me had been packed away. What made it worse was how deliberate everything felt. My stepmom started tightening rules again, but in smaller, more strategic ways. The internet password changed and wasn't shared with me. Groceries became assigned, with certain foods suddenly off-limits unless I asked. Laundry days were restricted. Even the thermostat became something I had to get permission to adjust. None of it was extreme enough on its own to point to and say, this is abuse. But together, it created this constant pressure. It felt like being slowly pushed out without anyone saying it outright. At the same time, she began involving my dad in everything. Every small complaint, every inconvenience, every moment she could twist into a problem became something she brought to him. And he believed her. Or, at least, he chose her version of things every time. There was one night where it all came together in a way that made everything clear. Dinner was quiet, like most nights had become. Plates, utensils, the sound of chairs moving, but no real conversation. I got up to put my plate in the sink, and she stopped me mid-step. She told me I'd left a mess in the kitchen earlier. I hadn't. I hadn't even been home for most of the day. I said that calmly. She didn't argue the point directly. Instead, she shifted it. Said that even if it wasn't me, I should be more mindful, that in this house everyone contributes, that I had a pattern of being careless. My dad backed her up immediately. Not with anything specific, just agreement. General statements about attitude, about respect, about how things have been building. It wasn't about the kitchen. It never was. After that, consequences started showing up. My stepmom told me that since I'd made independent decisions about my future, I should start acting independently in other ways too. That included paying for my own things. My phone bill was the first to go. Then school-related expenses they had previously covered. Small things at first, then bigger ones. When I pointed out that I was still a minor, my dad told me that choices have consequences. That if I was adult enough to go behind their backs, I was adult enough to deal with the fallout. It became clear pretty quickly that this wasn't about teaching responsibility. It was punishment. I reached out to my mom more during this time. Not constantly, but enough to keep some kind of connection. She was still in the halfway house, still trying to build something stable. There wasn't much she could offer in terms of resources, but she listened. That alone felt different from anything I was getting at home. She asked if I wanted to come stay with her once she got approved for transitional housing. It wasn't immediate and there were restrictions, but it was something. I didn't answer right away. Part of me didn't trust the situation. Another part of me didn't know if leaving one unstable environment for another would actually fix anything. Things escalated before I had to make that decision. The acceptance letter came in on a weekday afternoon. I was home alone when I saw the email. It didn't feel like some big, dramatic moment. It was quiet. Just me sitting there, staring at the screen, knowing that something had officially changed. I didn't tell them right away. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wanted one moment where it just belonged to me. They found out anyway. My stepmom went through the mail that evening and saw something from the university. That was enough. By the time I got home, both of them were waiting. This time, it wasn't yelling. It was worse. They sat me down like it was some kind of formal discussion. My stepmom had papers in front of her, notes she'd written. My dad looked tired, but firm. She talked first. About finances, about logistics, about how unrealistic it was for me to leave. She laid out everything like it was a business presentation. Costs, risks, potential failures. She made it sound like the only logical option was to stay. Then she shifted it. Said that if I insisted on going, they wouldn't support it. Not financially, not logistically, not in any way. No help moving, no help with supplies, nothing. My dad confirmed it. Said it was my decision, but I'd be on my own. There wasn't a threat in his tone. It was just flat. I asked what that meant for the time I had left before I turned 18. My stepmom answered that part. She said that as long as I was under their roof, I'd follow their rules. And if I couldn't do that, I should start thinking about other arrangements. It landed exactly how she intended. The next few weeks blurred together. I started preparing quietly, gathering documents, packing things little by little, figuring out what I actually needed. My mom's situation improved faster than expected. She got approved for a small apartment through a program connected to the halfway house. It wasn't much, but it was something stable. I left 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. There wasn't a big confrontation. No dramatic exit. I told my dad the night before. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded, like it was something he'd already accepted. My stepmom didn't come out of the bedroom. Moving into my mom's place didn't feel like a victory. It felt uncertain. The apartment was small, barely furnished, and everything about it was temporary. But it was quieter in a way that didn't feel threatening. For a little while, things felt manageable. Then reality started catching up. Money was tight. Not in a vague way, but in a constant, daily calculation of what could be afforded and what couldn't. My mom was working, but the kind of job she could get right out of that situation didn't pay much. Bills came faster than anything else. I picked up part-time work before school even started. It wasn't optional. It was necessary. The distance from my dad's house didn't fix everything the way I thought it might. Some things just followed. There were moments where my mom slipped back into old habits. Not anything that put her back where she'd been, but enough to make things unstable. Missed shifts, bad decisions with money, people from her past showing up again. It created this constant feeling that everything could fall apart at any time. College started, and it was nothing like what I'd imagined. I was always tired, always behind on something. Work, classes, responsibilities at home. There wasn't space to just exist as a student. I stopped hearing from my dad entirely after a few months. No calls. No messages. Nothing on birthdays or holidays. It was like once I left, that connection just ended. I found out later through someone else that he and my stepmom told people I'd chosen a different path and that they were respecting my independence. It sounded clean and reasonable when they said it like that. It wasn't what happened. By the time my first year ended, Everything felt heavier than when it started. Not because of one big thing, but because of all the smaller ones adding up. My mom was still struggling to stay steady. I was barely keeping up with school and work. There wasn't a safety net anywhere. One night, after a long shift, I got a message from an unknown number. It was my stepmom. Not an apology, not anything like that. Just a short message saying that if I ever wanted to fix things, I knew where to find them. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I already knew what fixing things meant to her. It meant going back. And there wasn't anything left there for me to go back to. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.